what's a diplomat? I thought that was, like James Bond. Lots of comments like these. We need to have something that talks about women in this line of work.
There's strength in diversity. And now I'm going to own the fact that I am different and then use that to serve my country even better, as well as educate people.
So yeah, it took me about 4 years to publish this.
Women are the hero of each story. I mean, like one moment they're helping American citizens in a crisis, and the next moment they're like defending the country in a war zone.
My dad was a boat mechanic when I was growing up. My mom, she mostly stayed home with us. I had all these ideas and big dreams that came from these movies or TV, and I wanted to just explore the world.
Welcome to another episode of the New College Perspective. I'm your host, 𝗪𝗪, and I know you guys love our early career advice episodes. I know this because you guys send me emails about it all the time. But we have another one today. We are going to explore a career as a United States diplomat. And if you don't know what a U.S. diplomat is, well, today, by the end of this episode, you will. And it is a career that allows you to travel around the world serving your country. And it is just as exciting as it sounds. Today, our guest, Alicia Ford, is a first-generation college graduate. And she is also a real-life United States diplomat. And she's been doing this, guys, for 17 years and wrote a 5-star book review called Real Stories from Real Diplomats, Experiences of Women Serving at U.S. Embassies Around the World. Her hope is to inspire the next generation of women diplomats to join her amazing career. Alicia, welcome to the New College Perspective. How are you this morning?
Hi, good morning, 𝗪𝗪. I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here. I'm a first-gen college student, so I'm excited to share my story.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awesome. And I want you, or we want you here at the New College Perspective to feel right at home on the show. So can you share a little bit about yourself, where you went to school, and your favorite piece of college advice for our first and second gen students that are listening today?
Sure. So I am originally from Long Island, New York. During high school, I moved to the Poconos. After that, I went to college at Temple University in Northern Philadelphia. Then I moved to Boston to start with the U.S. Department of State. I moved again to D.C. to continue my career with the Department of State. And then I moved overseas. I went to Honduras, Peru, Barbados, Romania, Turkey, and now I'm in Trinidad and Tobago. There's been a lot of ups and downs along the way. I'm a mom now. I'm married now. And It's been 17 years of adventures all over the place.
That's really crazy, like all those places that you traveled. And I can't wait for our listeners to dig into all of those places. And you went to, you said Temple University for?
Yes. Master's. I did a master's of public management at University of Maryland. That is what I did while I was in DC working full-time at State Department. Both times when I was studying at Temple for my undergrad and University of Maryland for my master's, I studied abroad. So with Temple, I studied abroad in Mexico twice. I went to Nicaragua, Italy, and then with University of Maryland, I went to Ethiopia to study international economics.
Wow. When you were in college or maybe post-college, have you run into any advice that you think would be good for our first or second gen students to hear since you've gone through so much in your college career so far?
Yes, I have lots of advice to share. One of the things I did a lot when I was in college was I worked part-time. I had a lot of different part-time jobs and I saved my money. This is something I started in high school too, because I had a lot of big ideas of what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to travel. I knew I wanted to do all sorts of things. And I remember my mom telling me, if you can do anything you want, as long as you're able to pay for it. Yes. So that was my motivation to work part-time, save up. That helped me study abroad so many times. I was in touch with the financial aid office at Temple. And so I made sure I was able to apply for anything that I was eligible for to also be able to afford the study abroad. When I was at University of Maryland, the Ethiopia Study Abroad program was open to undergrad and grad students. And it was the first time that they offered that program in Ethiopia. And one of the reasons for it was to make sure that a type of study abroad program was available and affordable to students. It was a 2.5-week
Mhm.
program, and it's much more affordable than an entire semester in Europe. So it's nice to
Yeah.
have a lot of different international experiences so young. Advice is to study abroad if you can, work part-time, gain skills, earn money, live below your means. So anything that you do earn, do not spend all at once. I used to
Yeah.
keep half of what I made and then spend half of what I made. So I was always
Yeah.
saving as I was experiencing it, exploring. Also, they had an Institute for Survey Research. And so I was an interviewer performing interviews to gather information for a variety of studies that they were participating in. So
Mhm.
that was a really, really great job. That might have been my favorite job because a few months
Yeah.
after starting, I became a supervisor. And so this is another piece of advice. If you are able
Mhm.
to get any type of job or any type of experience really in some type of
Mhm.
leadership role or supervisory role, you gain a lot of experience and skills, and it looks great on your resume. So I was a supervisor for that Institute for Survey Research for about 2 years. And I think that's part of the reason why I was qualified to start with State Department right out of college.
Yeah, yeah. This is Alicia, you're dropping some gems right here because that is good to think about the supervisor positions, kind of navigating your way, not just to show leadership, which I think is really important. And the fact that you were able to go straight from undergrad into the State Department, which is really hard to do, guys. Like we're going to talk all about all these things later, but this means that you have some really good tips and good advice. And I know right now it's very possible that this will be the first time our students actually learn what it means to be a United States diplomat. I remember my first time learning about it. I had a professor named Dr. J, and so shout out to him right now, who changed my life by like telling me what it was to be a United States diplomat. And so I want to do that for somebody else right now. I would love for you to take some time to share with us, like, what is a United States diplomat? It sounds so cool, but what does it mean? And what's the process to become one?
Yes, it is very cool. A United States diplomat is basically a government employee that works for the US government overseas. So we are representing the US government, the American people, the country as a whole. We go through a very rigorous process to get to this
Mhm.
point, but there are a lot of ways to pursue this career. For me, I started civil service with the State Department, meaning I worked domestically for about 7 years before I started working overseas. So something interesting about the State Department, it is a US government federal agency. It is in charge of implementing the president's foreign policy agenda, which changes with every administration. But we are civil servants, we are foreign service officers, and we're all working towards the same goal. So we work in a lot of different areas overseas. So for me, when I started domestically, I was working as a passport specialist. So I was an expert in adjudicating US passports so that people can travel. I
Wow.
worked in the federal budget office. So I learned how the US government federal budget works overseas. I worked in consular and management roles. So I was adjudicating visas, passports, assisting US citizens. I was helping with a lot of different logistical issues and supporting the embassy's mission, getting everything done, getting all of the meetings supported, making sure travel was planned for everyone, just all of that management behind the scenes stuff, operations. I did a lot of work in that area. You have diplomats that are attending lots of meetings with foreign governments, with multinational organizations, with locals, speaking to different people about different issues. There's just so much that we do out here. So there really is something for everyone.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, there's lots of ways to get into the foreign service. There's the traditional written exam, oral assessment that can take a long time, and that is one of the ways to join. There are civil service. You can work anywhere in the federal government and get into the State Department civil service, and then you can convert to the foreign service like I did. You can
Mhm.
do fellowships. There's a variety of
Mhm.
fellowships, Pickering, Rango fellowships, where you are able to get your master's degree mostly paid for, and then you can work in the US Foreign Service, another very rigorous process. So there
Yeah.
are lots of ways to do this.
Yeah, no, this is really good. And so for our first and second gen listeners, the traditional path, well, we always would say people should go on the State Department's website to learn officially about the process, of course. But there's a written exam, there's an oral exam, and there's a lot of different ways, as you talked about, to become a United States diplomat, which is really great. When you look back, do you have any like pivotal moments in your life that you think helped you go from first generation student to United States diplomat? I know that's not a normal path. And so I think that would be really helpful for our first and second gen students to hear.
The first pivotal moment in my life was when I moved from Long Island, New York to the Pocono Mountains, Pennsylvania. So when I was younger, I grew up in a very suburban, very big town near the beach, very diverse, everything at your fingertips. And then during high school, I moved to a very small rural town in the mountains. Everything's far away. Not as diverse. So it was two very different places I lived in at a younger age. So looking back, I realized that that experience taught me how to be resilient and adapt to new people, new surroundings. And it made it easier for me to then move down to Philadelphia and then to move to Boston and move overseas. So that was a pivotal moment in my life. Also, once I got to Temple and I did my first study abroad program, this was their Latin American study semester where you are studying Latin America, you're learning Spanish in Philly in the classroom, but you all go to Mérida, Mexico for 2 weeks and have an immersive experience. So you're learning about Spanish, you're learning about Mexican culture, you're volunteering, you're exploring, living with a host family. This experience changed my life. I have not wanted to stop traveling and learning ever since. It was so much fun, and I just loved how different everything was to me. That was my first time leaving the US. So it was
I was going to ask you
for
that.
me.
Man. Wow. Mérida, Mexico. That's so awesome that they had that wrapped into the program. I loved in your book, Real Stories from Real Diplomats, Experiences of Women Serving at U.S. Embassies Around the World, that you discussed the benefits and challenges of being a U.S. diplomat. And so can you share a few things in your book about the challenges and benefits with our students that are listening?
Definitely. Yes. This book has a lot in it. So it has stories from a variety of U.S. women diplomats. So you don't just hear my perspective, you hear stories from others also. So you get a very good variety of this lifestyle, this career, all different types of jobs we're doing, and in all corners of the globe. But yeah, so the pros and cons. Basically, this job is incredible, right? You get paid to travel and live abroad. I mean, there's just so much that comes from that, right? They pay for your housing overseas. So the embassy where you're assigned organizes that for you, and it's part of your compensation package. You're able to get these incredible experiences from moving and reinventing yourself every few years. These are unmatched experiences that you don't get from just going somewhere on vacation for a week. It's very different.
Yeah.
Working for the federal government is incredible. There's student loan repayment programs, lots of different benefits, good health insurance, 12 weeks of paid parental leave. There's just so much. You are serving the public, right? So you're working on something very fulfilling. All the State Department employees you'd probably meet would tell you how much they love their job, right? It's just so fulfilling to work towards something bigger than yourself. I'm going to share some of the challenges or the downsides, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it is exciting to move every few years, but it's also really hard. You have to keep learning and moving your stuff everywhere. The State Department helps you, but building a home and a community everywhere you go, making new friends, it takes work. Being away from friends and family, you have to try really hard to go home to visit, to maintain ties, stay in contact with them, have them come visit you, but you are far away from them. And then you don't always know where you're going to go. You have to be available worldwide. You're able to tell them your preferences and rank where you prefer to go and where your skills match best, but you might go somewhere you don't expect or maybe you don't like, and you have to work through that. So it's part of the adventure.
Yeah. I think adventure is a good word for it. Like, it is truly an adventure. And let's say our first and second gen students, now that we've opened their minds and their eyes to what it's like to be a U.S. diplomat, they apply, they get in, they go through the process, they're in. Okay. Now, I would love for you to give some early career advice that you would have loved to have heard when starting off as a newly minted U.S. diplomat in the first few years?
Yes. So I like to ask a lot of questions. So this is, I think, one of the pieces of advice I would share. I had a lot of mentors and I asked for a lot of help, and I was just asking a lot of questions through each step of the way, which I think is even more important for first gen college students. So you could like build your network in the field that you're working in or the field that you're interested in. So learning as much as you can, volunteering for everything. I had so much energy when I first started the career. I still do, but now things are a bit different 17 years later. But I was volunteering for everything. I was going to all sorts of meetings just to observe and listen. So especially early on in your career, you really want to get yourself out there, talking to people, building a network, and just learning as much as you can to figure out where your skills work best and where you might want to go next. You know, it's a journey. You don't just start a job and then that's it. You figure out what you might want to do as your next step.
Yeah, I think asking questions, I think that's really good advice, early career advice, especially for first and second gen students. You know, we have this tendency to just be like, oh, I'll just keep it all inside and I'll figure it out. But that's such a detriment because when you're new, this is the best time to go out there and ask questions and make mistakes because you're new. When you're in there all the time, like 17 years, you know, you're asking these basic questions. They're like, where were you? Doing where? So I think that's really good advice. And so now it is time to talk about your amazing book, Real Stories from Real Diplomats, Experiences of Women Serving at U.S. Embassies Around the World. And this book is so different from other diplomat books that I've read. And I've read a lot, guys, because it focuses on getting more women into the department to become U.S. diplomats. But this book, guys, takes it to a whole nother level because the stories you share, Alicia, about women, they're actually real. And women are the hero of each story. I mean, like one moment they're helping American citizens in a crisis. And the next moment, they're like defending the country in a war zone. It's like crazy, like all the different stories that are in here. And it's real. And that's what I love. I love that. So thank you, Alicia, for writing this. I am super happy that this is out there for people, and especially our first and second gen students to read. My first question is, how did you get these women from ambassadors to diplomats to share their amazing stories with you?
Wow. I started this project in 2020, and that was the year of the pandemic, and everybody was feeling very isolated. There were issues with the retention of women in the workforce. And so I felt like I needed to do something to help. And I always thought that it was important to share women's stories, especially in this line of work. We are doing so much, experiencing so many different unique things. And a lot of these stories go untold. So I reached out to all of our colleagues and I said, hey, I'm working on this project. It's a personal project. I'm doing this outside of work, but I think it's important to share stories about all these cool things and challenging things we're doing overseas. Make it in an easy to read format, short and sweet stories with a variety of perspectives so that the readers get a really good idea of what we're doing out here. And so I told them the vision, and I received so many stories. I was so overwhelmed, and I thought, oh man, this is going to take a lot longer than I thought, because there were some really good stories I received, but they were very long. And so my editing team and we were just working to make the stories kind of fit the vision of the book. So yeah, it took me about 4 years to publish this.
Yeah, this is a journey. I'm excited to like delve into the journey. So let's talk first about like the problem that this book is trying to solve, or the challenge. Let's say we can put it like that.
I have received so many questions about this line of work and about traveling overseas as a young, then single woman. And so lots of questions that I received throughout my career, basically to fill the gap in knowledge. There's a lot of people that don't know what a diplomat is or about this career. And I think it's important to try and share that so that everyone understands that it exists and it's a career path that you can pursue if you're interested. But I got a lot of questions when I was younger, like, oh, you don't really look like a diplomat. And, oh, what's a diplomat? I thought that was, like James Bond.
Yeah.
Lots of comments like these, and over time, I'm like, oh, like I feel like we need to have something that talks about women in this line of work.
Are there a lot of women in the foreign service or women in the federal government in general? Is there like more men or women? Can you talk a little bit about that for our listeners to understand kind of a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't know the exact stats currently. And for the federal government as a whole, I'd like to say it's about 50-50. But the Foreign Service is a bit unique. There's been more women in recent years, but historically, this job has been filled by men, right? So I think we're about 30 to 40% women in the U.S. Foreign Service, and the State Department has been trying to recruit and retain more women. It's only been about 50 years since women are allowed to serve as a foreign officer after getting married. So there's been lots of changes, but this career is quite unique, and I think it's important that we have a bit more diversity since we're representing the U.S. And so that's part of the reason for the book.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I want to pull that out like for our listeners that it was in 1972. If you got married before 1972, if you got married and you were a woman, you had to resign. But then after that, you could be married in the foreign service as a diplomat. So there's a lot of changes that have happened. And this book is definitely going after to try to get more women into the foreign service to become U.S. diplomats. So can you share your favorite story in the book? I know it's super hard to do, Alicia, because there's so many great stories, but like, what's your favorite story? Or if you want to share two, that's fine, in the book that you think our listeners would enjoy hearing about.
So I would like to say that all the stories are my favorite because I did receive way more than what I actually fit in the book.
That means there's a part two coming, right? That's what it means, right?
Yeah, probably. If I can find the bandwidth, yes.
Oh, yeah, I know.
There definitely is demand, and there's lots to share. Yeah, I picked these stories on purpose. We included some U.S. diplomats who retired. We have some younger women who shared their stories. I wanted to make sure that we had stories from different career tracks, right? So we have some political officers that shared their stories, consular officers. We have women who are moms and discuss motherhood in the foreign service. So there's a variety of writing styles, and there are a variety of stories. Some of the highlights so that you have an idea of what you'll be reading.
Yeah.
We do have some ambassadors. We have a Jamaican American woman who talked about why she chose the foreign service over other career options. We have some women talking about working in Europe, finding their husband overseas, all the fun that they had in Mexico. Some women who are the top Latinas in foreign policy, talking about their time serving in Afghanistan, in Brazil. So we have a variety of countries also represented, right? Because we serve a lot of different places, and really incredible women. So, I thank these contributors for participating in this project.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome that it's covering the world, but also the different types of women that are serving in varying capacities. Like, you can definitely tell that you thought this through. And when you were writing the book, was there ever a moment you thought of like giving up or, being like, okay, I know it took 4 years, right? You said 4 years, so that's a long time, but like, what was the motivation to keep you going when there were moments of like, oh, this is really tough?
Yeah. So I wrote in the beginning of the book how I got to finish it. And the process for making it. It's completely DIY. So I did every step of the process. And this was my first time doing it, right? So it took me some time, lots of Googling, YouTube videos, how to make an index, how to design a book cover, how to format the whole thing with the manuscript. The editing process took a long time, picking and choosing the stories and editing them down to just a couple pages. And so, yes, it was hard. It took longer than I thought. There were times where I didn't work on it for months because I was overwhelmed at work, or I was a new mom and I was adjusting to these changes in my life. So as life was happening, I kind of picked it back up, put it down, starting and stopping. So I never thought of giving up. I am a determined person. I never to start something and not finish. So I knew I was going to finish this. It was just a matter of time. So thank you to my supportive husband, my mom for helping take care of my daughter so I could focus on it. The latter end of my maternity leave, I was working on it in different countries. And so it was just something I had to do.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is really awesome. Like I think we can learn something from that, right? Like if you need to put it down, it's okay. Just as long as you go back and pick it up.
Mhm.
You don't have to just finish it straight through. And life will be lifing. Like as they say, life is life.
Yes.
You just have to be like, okay, you know what? I'm not stopping. I just need a break. And you were able to, fully accomplish this, and which is really awesome. And I think it's going to be really helpful. What I would like to do right now is talk a little bit about this idea of the unlikely diplomat. And I found like in the book, there were a couple unlikely diplomat story themes. And so the first one I came across was a theme about people assuming that you're not a real American, right?
Mhm.
And so I would love for you to talk about those stories and what can be gleaned from there. I believe Ambassador Julie Chung was talking about that, but there were others that were talking about this idea of not being a real American.
Yes, yes. That is one of the themes of the book. We all look very different, right? But when you're overseas representing the US, it's a big world. There's a lot of people who assume an American diplomat is kind of like that James Bond figure, like an older
Yeah,
male in a
yeah.
black
We
suit.
talked about that. Yep.
And
Uh-huh.
that's it. And there's a lot of different people that do this line of work. So that's, part of the reason for the book, just showing that there's women doing this job too. And we're all different ages, all different backgrounds, all different educational work experiences. But yes, Ambassador Julie Chung's story is primarily about constantly being told by others that she doesn't appear to be a real American, and how she overcame that. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the comments I used to receive was, "Oh, like you don't really look like a diplomat," and people. It's
Mhm.
always just like an educating moment
Yeah.
to just show, there's just different people representing the U.S.
Mhm.
government, and Americans. They all look different.
Mhm.
And so, yes, there are women who are first generation American US diplomats. So in the book, they talk about either immigrating to the US or their parents moving to the US, and how that shaped their life and their choice to work on behalf of the US government overseas,
Mhm.
working or speaking English with an accent from the first or second
Yeah.
language they learned before
Yeah. I think
English.
that was Mariana. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And so there is a lot of that in there. And my own personal experience, I wasn't sure if I would ever do this type of job. I knew in college after studying abroad, I wanted to do something with international affairs or international business. And when State Department was at the career fair at Temple University advertising these entry-level jobs, issuing US passports to American citizens, I just thought, wow, like I want everybody to be able to have this experience that I had studying abroad, So I want to work for a mission like that. And instead of joining the private sector, I had another job offer that I turned down because this felt more in line with what I wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really great to just spend some time, with the Ambassador Julie Chung story, the Mariana story of you kind of saw the progression of diplomats realizing that people were seeing them differently, but then taking that difference and saying, wow, there's strength in diversity. And now I'm going to own the fact that I am different and then use that to serve my country even better. But the second unlikely diplomat story, which you started getting into, which I would love to talk about more, is the unlikely first gen diplomat. And
Mhm.
no one expects first gen students to become US diplomats. And what was cool was that the first gen diplomat story that's in the book was your own story,
Mhm.
right? When you became a US diplomat, what was the feeling when you passed the oral assessment? Like, what was going through your mind when you passed it and you knew that you were officially coming in to be a United States diplomat?
I couldn't believe it. It was something at that point in my life, like I was working towards, I was preparing rigorously for,
Mhm,
but I wasn't sure if it was actually going to happen. And when I
mhm,
not only passed, but did very well and scored highly, I thought,
Yeah.
wow, okay, so I guess this is meant to be. I
Yeah.
didn't mention in the beginning, but my mom, she mostly stayed home with us. She did some part-time
Mhm.
jobs here and there, but mostly was a
Mhm.
stay-at-home mom. My dad was a boat mechanic when I was growing up, and
Mm.
I had all these ideas and big dreams that came from these movies or TV, these like waterfalls I saw on TV and these exotic lands and
Mhm.
ancient pyramids, all this stuff I was very drawn to, and I wanted to just
Yeah.
explore the world. And
Mm.
so I started doing that on my own after starting with State Department or when I was studying abroad. But then with State Department and having like a salary, I was traveling a lot. And
Yeah.
then when I was able to move overseas and to be paid to live this amazing lifestyle, I was just like, is this real life? Did this really happen? So I didn't really believe it at first, but I was so ready for it. I was so excited. They assigned me to Lima, Peru. That was my first choice on the list.
Wow.
Just so
Wow. Man. So they called you down. There's this thing, guys, where they will call you down and they'll give you a flag. So you heard your name and then you got the flag. And man, I guess there was so much stuff rushing through your mind. Who was there to like cheer you on or, you know,
yeah, my
I
whole
forget.
family was there. We were all
Oh
sitting
man.
there, and I was the first person called because my maiden name
Yeah, your
started
name.
with an A.
Yeah.
And when they said Lima, Peru, I was just so excited because you don't know for sure, right? I said my
Yeah.
preference is to go there. There were open positions. And ultimately, they decide. And so it was a really exciting moment. And then after months of different trainings, I just left. Single woman, just kind of started over with this new career, and
Yes.
just kind of always maximizing the opportunities I have.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good advice. Like using the money for the things that are experiences. I think I've heard that. Like we have the holiday season, so instead of giving people gifts, they're just like, no, we're going to put our money together and do an experience because that matters more than the gifts, like new clothes or shoes and things like that. So that seems like what you really did. You had that mindset early on before it's like the cool thing to do now to really like maximize your money for experiences, and these
Mhm.
experiences when they all added up, 60 countries, and you said you went multiple times, allowed you to then be able to apply and become a U.S. diplomat. So that is really
Mhm.
cool to hear. And so we have students right now that are probably wanting to become a U.S. diplomat because of this conversation and because they heard about your book and they're going to pick up your book and read about it. But there are opportunities that exist to become U.S. diplomats and have your education paid for, sometimes completely. Can you share a few of those opportunities? And I also have a few to share. And I think this part will be helpful as students go about like looking for opportunities to join.
Definitely. There's actually a couple chapters in the book that kind of serves as a career guide and has all sorts of links and information for actually pursuing the job. So there's lots of ways to do this, and you can do it through your university and then have maybe your graduate degree paid for. In my case, since I was working with the civil service, I was able to get my student loans repaid for me. There's a couple different programs that State Department
Ah,
has for
okay.
that. So even if you don't do the foreign service initially, with the federal government, there's programs like that. For example, when I was at the University of Maryland doing my master's degree, I was
Yeah.
doing it on the weekends. One of the courses we took was about the federal budget process. And I was needing to take that class while I was working at the State Department's budget office. And so this class directly related to my job. And I asked, hey, I have to take this course for my executive master's program. Is
Mhm.
there external training funding available for it? And it was approved. So I had that
What?
test completely paid.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
it's good to always ask and see what's available. But now State Department internships are paid. It wasn't always that way.
Yes.
It's unpaid.
Yes.
Gives you direct experience with the State Department and tells you if you would like to pursue this as a career, and gives you experience to talk about in your interview and on your application process. A lot of the women in the book are Rangel and Pickering fellows, and so they went through that program. There's more information about that in the book also, but there are lots of ways to join.
Yeah. And I'm going to actually read off. You talked about two so far and then the internships and all of that. I'm just going to read them off so that people can hear. So We have the William D. Clark Senior Diplomatic Security Fellowship. That's to go into diplomatic security. You have the Foreign Affairs International Technology Fellowship. So if you're into IT, you can get that covered. Yeah, you have the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service. They have programs, as well as, this is a new one that I just found out about, the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service Pilot Fellowship Program. I know there's like so many out there. I just hope by reading that list, hearing what Alicia just said as well, you have a lot of options as first and second gen students to say, you know what, I'm interested in this career. Let me look at these programs and see what could work for me. Okay. So now I want to ask you, when you got your hand for the first time on your book, where were you? And what was going through your mind? This is your baby, basically, for 4 years. You had this baby for 4 years.
Yeah. So the first proof I received, right? Because you have to go through a couple proofs just to double check the layout and everything before it actually is published and available to the public. The first time I received it, saw it, I thought, oh my God, it's real. It's done. So it felt, it was very exciting, and it was kind of like unreal to like see it printed in paper.
Where were you though? Like, where were you? Like at the post office? Were you at your, like you opened it?
Yeah.
Did you save it? You're like, okay, I'm going to.
Yeah, I was actually on a vacation with my family, with my husband and she was 1 at the time, not even 1 year old at the time, but the proof came in the mail when we were on vacation in the Berkshires, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So I opened it and I looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, like it's done.
As we start to land the plane, I want to do a lightning round of questions. We receive questions from our students, and I think you would be a perfect person to ask. And so if that's cool, I'm going to ask you just a few questions. Is that good?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. So the first question I have is, a lot of our students have reached out, like if they're interested in being a foreign service officer or a diplomat, what classes or things should they be taking, or internships should they be doing in order to get into the foreign service?
I would say anything that's international related.
Okay.
Any classes that have to do with foreign policy or international business, even different languages, learned like a language, really any type of international type course would help you get into this type of work. And then, like I was saying too, like I didn't intern at State Department. None of my jobs in college were really directed or geared towards this kind of career, but I built skills. I learned a lot by working in a lot
Talk about that. Yeah.
right, and like being a supervisor, learning how to work with people. So I feel like any experience is valuable experience, and there's a lot of different jobs that you can do with the State Department.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're traveling around the world. What's your favorite food that you were able to eat in one of these countries that you traveled?
The first thing that I thought of when you asked this question was lomo saltado in Lima, Peru. It's one of their national dishes. Peru is one of my favorite countries. It's just my experience there was so incredible, serving with the State Department as my first tour. And Lima is known for having some of the best food in the world. There's a lot of different types of food that they have. But besides like the food in Lima and then Machu Picchu, Peru is bursting with all sorts of things to see. The country is so diverse. I went to the Amazon a few times, didn't even realize the Amazon was a third of Peru's country.
I'm just learning that now.
Yeah. So there's lots of great food to try.
Okay, next question I have. So it sounds like with this book, you're at the beginning of building a very impactful business. Like I can see how this is going to take off and help so many more women join to become U.S. diplomats. Is your family, or are you doing any other impactful business since you are like all about making an impact? Is there anything else you guys are involved with?
Yeah, so my husband, I met him during my second assignment in the Foreign Service in Barbados. And when I met him, he had a startup soccer field that has now grown into a sports complex. This is something he's continued to work on while following me around the world. And basically, people are there playing soccer all the time. It's called the Oasis in Barbados. Instagram is at Find the Oasis. Lots going on there all the time. So if you're in Barbados or if you're traveling there, something cool to check out. A cool like local spot to lime, as they say.
Yeah. Wow, that's really, really cool. And so this is the last question. Where can people buy the book? Can you give us all of your social media handles so that we can start following you and learning about what it's like to be a woman in the U.S. Department of State?
Yes, yes. So the book is available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon. The audio version is coming out soon, so look for that.
What?
And we can share a link so that if you're interested, we can share more
Yes.
information and updates with what we're doing. And you'll know when the audio version gets on Amazon. The book has an Instagram handle, so at Diplomats the book is where you can find all cool pictures and videos of the book and people reading it around the world. For me, my Instagram handle is along with Alicia. And then we have a Gmail address, diplomatsthebook@gmail.com. And something I haven't mentioned about the book too, a lot of the women share either their Instagram or their blogs or how to contact them on LinkedIn. So you can reach out to any of us really if you want to ask a question about the book, about the career.
So you're saying if anybody is interested, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn to get more info.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Man, this was a great early career episode. It was great learning about your first gen story as a U.S. diplomat, as well as diving into the book, Real Stories from Real Diplomats, Experiences of Women Serving at U.S. Embassies Around the World. Thank you so much for coming on The New College Perspective. I have really enjoyed having you share your time with me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning.
Great. Thank you so much, Jerica. Thank you, everyone.